We're live. Hello, everybody. I am here with Anabel, and we're going to speak about the seventh archetype, the seventh gene key. And I'm super excited. I've been waiting since I feel last year since we were in Newbold. Welcome, Anabel.
Thank you. Thank you, Bella. I'm excited to be here too and have this conversation with you.
Yeah, so you have the seventh gene key in your vocation, and that's in the gene keys, kind of where we speak about the hardest part of it, but also the most beautiful thing when it's unlocked. So it's basically the core wound. What the soul is deciding to work with in this lifetime is kind of how I see it. And then when we unlock it, it becomes the fuel that fuels our life's work, like how we serve in the world. So I kind of just like want to jump in there and hear about your experience with having this archetype of leadership in such an important place in your chart.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what's in my vocation, and that's, as you mentioned, in the core wound as well. So I feel like even, for me, seeing it through that perspective, it's been the greatest challenge in a way, something that I've experienced since I was, as far as I can remember. I feel like I've known this aspect of it. And then I have a line 5 there as well. So, 7.5. So it's kind of like all these, the stacked of responsibility in a way. That's how it's shown up for me. But I really feel that the more that I have worked through that division shadow and how that's shown up in my life, it's what's unraveled the ability to express in the world what my vocation is, and to be responsible for the impact of that voice as well, speaking into a lot of these leadership themes that even right now I feel like I've never felt it so alive as I have this year. Coming into this 2020 and all the beautiful mess, that's been on Earth. It's also, I feel, it's also given us a new insight and possibility and space for that virtuous leadership to actually emerge. That which I call feminine leadership, and because it is based in those feminine principles of creation. And I really feel like very alive in that even right now. Like every time I start speaking leadership, I just feel it like it's this beautiful essence that's so rooted in the feminine, in that yin space, but also fanned with that flame, that sacred flame of creation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so please tell us a little bit about what you do, what your mission is in the world, and I feel like it's completely aligned with this. That's kind of why I start there, because it's like what you embody really in the world.
Yeah, thank you. So embodiment is really what I focus on, and it's for me, embodiment looks like being able to embrace the full spectrum of being human and also the full spectrum of being divine, that it's not separate in any way, but it's complementary of each other. And I really feel like even there, starting there, looking at the division of how we divide these certain aspects of ourselves, right? And also through cultural beliefs, societal beliefs, conditioning, even, religion, even spiritual paths that divide us, that kind of puts us into, this is what we are, and it divides us. And for me, it's really about the journey of learning how to allow the flow to inform us, and that flow is always sort of moving in movement. There is no fixed space inside of it. And so for me, my focus is feminine leadership and the embodiment of being, that feminine force in the world, not disconnected from it. So it's really, I like to see it as kind of being that an embodied mystic, and it's not being the mystic that's like off of out there, that's what we do as well. But it is also like, how do I bring this into the material, into the physical form? Because I feel that that's what's most needed. It's really that feminine leadership that is, creating out of nothing, because there are no models of this leadership that we can look out and follow, or see, because we're not meant to. We're sort of creating as we go. And, and I really feel like that seventh is the ability to listen so deeply that you drop below the noise, you drop below your filters, below your conditioning, deep down into that void where all is life. And that's where that wisdom emerges from, and that's where we can lead from.
Mm-hmm. I love that you say that. So I have it in my purpose, and I often feel like I want to add inner guidance, because it has to, it's like all leadership kind of starts with self-leadership. And otherwise, if you're not anchored in your inner guidance, how can you ever become a role model or a voice for any outer leadership? And
absolutely.
I wonder for you, because when we see you, it kind of feels like you have it figured out, because you are already doing the work in the world. But what was the journey like? Because the shadow is the vision, for example. What was the journey for you to kind of embody this kind of, future leadership and feeling into what's coming and how we walk in that direction?
Yeah, so it's been, I feel the healing journey, as you know, is really humbling. If anything, that's the word that I feel really encapsulates what my journey has been into being able to tap in and drop in below all the noise and all the stuff that's out here in the external. And, for me, I was very successful in my younger years inside of what, the world would define as success, and having it all and still realizing how unhappy I was and controlling and a workaholic and like all these different things that it was almost like, yes, I had everything externally, but there was no connection. There was no true human connection. And it was like, everybody play your roles and, and everything's gonna be fine. And so when life, very non-gracefully humbled me and sort of took all of those things away, it really left me in a place where it took away all that I had ever identified with, all that I thought that was, stable, stability, form, image, all those different things. And so for me, I really feel like my journey began, we all have like these different turning points in our lives, but when I gave birth to my son, I started actually having memories, of my youth. And I feel that when, and I kind of forgot about that 2 years later, my great humbling happened. And I feel that what that did was that I started to look at my son in a different way, where it was, what am I going to teach my son? Now that everything's been taken away from me and what I thought I knew, I don't. And so, for me, that journey began with like, I never thought, oh, I'm going to be doing this for others, or I want to be in leadership, or I want to, it wasn't any of that. It was actually going into a very sincere place of saying, what is life about? If it's not about having the house, if it's not about finding the right husband on paper, if it's not about, having the bank account, like, what is it? What's really lasting? And so that's kind of what took me on my journey. And my journey was long. It's about 10 years of like deep, diving into the shadow world, underworld. I did a great journey with womb shamanism, and then I taught for that mystery school. And so for me, from the beginning, it was a lot about going into the shadow world and to all the aspects that I didn't want to look at in myself. And I'm really grateful for that, Bella, because I feel that, one of the things that I find about the line 5s is that we can get like very focused in things and become rigid, right? And all that. But in a way, I feel like that kind of served me on my journey, because I would find something and it's like I had to commit to that. There was no external distractions to take me from it. And so I feel that's why I was able to really go into those depths early on and to stay committed to it, even when everything was like, my family was like, you need to go to therapy. Like, this is not normal, all this, because I was doing grief work. I was doing, all these other things that we still weren't really talking about. Now, blessedly, there are subjects that are more, out there. But for me, yeah, it was really humbling. And trust me, like that whole like thing, having it together, do we ever really have it together? I think not. Because even now, I feel like as we speak, I'm going through a big process myself within myself, where I'm being called to go in deeper, listen deeper. And one of the things is that whenever I start feeling like all the noise out there, instead of me moving to inject my opinion or what I feel is right or wrong, I always go deep. Like I go inside. I go to my garden, I go to my room, I lock the door, and I'm just sort of like going inward to listen deeper than what that external noise is. And from there, I always get that clarity. And I say always, but this is just now, it's not always, but I can trust that. I can trust that I can drop into that space. And if I cultivate that and trust that, the timing itself will bring me out. And then what I have to offer comes from that place of rootedness and depth, not from the, sort of like, what are people expecting you to say? And, because there's been a lot of that's been challenging. It's like people expect you to tell them something, tell them what they should believe, or tell them what they should do, and I think that that's part of that seventh key as well, is that, as it says, I love that it says that, like, sometimes not guiding is the guidance in it. The non-guidance is the guidance, because it's not for us to tell people what to do, but like to stand in that encouragement of you. The answers are within you, and it's not what I have to say, although you're put in that position in a way. It's very paradoxical. I find this key very paradoxical.
Right. And what is it like going down to the underworld somehow feels like it's guiding you through the future and helping other people going there. So what is it with the underworld which is often what the last place we want to go, that you feel magical, or the underworld or the womb or the darkness? Like how is that the place of creation? How is that the place that where we can come from?
Yeah. So, for me, I've seen it like, what resonates for me really is like our three centers, right? Which is our mental, our heart center, and then our womb center, or Dantian, or, Hara space. And the way that I see it is like, inside of my journey there was an aspect of it where, okay, I had to mentally, understand, like, okay, there's something else out there, and then start to drop into the heart center, which is what softens us. And, then we become more compassionate, and we, create that space. And I really feel like a lot of people that are very into, the love and light, it's like, this is where they're at. They're in that beautiful heart overflowing space. But what I found about the underworld, that it was actually an invitation to drop in deeper into that center of creation, and for me, I feel, that womb space, and I talk about this a lot, is that the womb space does not recognize right, wrong, destructive, constructive. It's a place of birth, and it's also a place of death. And so when you go there, you're going to come into see a lot of things that you have been denying or haven't been wanting to see, because I really feel like a lot of the memories that the psyche cannot hold are held in this space. And so it's sort of going into this place where all your secrets are in, and all your, things that you're ashamed about are in, and you're gonna walk through this space. And for me, having the ability to have done that, I feel that now, because I did that and I am comfortable in that space, now my clients and the people I work with, or when, where I'm holding space, that's the sort of depth of container that I can provide for them, because I walk through my own hell. So I can relate, and while I'm not going to walk it for them, I can hold the light while they do that. While they're, walking through their thing and feeling, because I remember feeling like, I think I am crazy. Like, I think I need to go see a psychiatrist, all these things that now, and I feel like at one point I also felt like, oh, well, this was my journey. This is how people need to do their journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now I understand that that was my journey because I had to get certain understandings to activate my blueprint. But that doesn't mean that other people have to experience the same thing, especially if I already went there and I'm like, we can navigate this corridor better, and I just see the richness and the depth that is access through walking that underworld and the reward, because not just anyone's gonna want to go there, but when you're ready and when you hear that calling and when you have that calling in your belly, you're gonna go there. And I feel like that's where true power is, because that's where you get to see the false power versus the true power, and false power is all of our external constructs and our belief systems and stuff like that. And so really diving in there, I feel like now you can start to explore like your sexual shadows and your, traumas and all of those things, because there's another aspect of it where we tend to eroticize our wounds. And, and so there's a lot of people doing great deep work, but there's an aspect of it that is still eroticizing a lot of the wounding. So there has to be like that deep dive into the shadow world. And yeah, it's, it's not for everyone, but I think more and more people are really feeling the call to go there because of all the deceit, that we're seeing. And again, that lives inside of us as well. The deceit, the hiding, the shame, the guilt, all of these different things. So
Right.
yeah, I'm a champion of the underworld. Let's go.
And I feel like you are, I had to look at your chart because you are also, you were mentioning sexuality. And when I look at your chart, I mean, first of all, you have so many fifth lines in your culture, in your, like your whole kind of soul, the radiance, the purpose, and your IQ, and it's in your EQ even, and it's your sexuality. And it's that fifth line of entrapment, manipulation, or I see it as the archetype that can play all the strings of the guitar, and it can do it for good or for bad. Kind of the same thing with the 7, it's leadership for good or for bad. Mm-hmm. So when we speak about womb wisdom and the underworld, like how is that connected to sexuality? And even in your case, what you are doing in the world is the 59.5. So that's also very much about intimacy, transparency, kind of even the sexual part. Like, would you speak to us a bit about that? Because that's often something that people don't see as like leadership sexuality, or, womb wisdom. Is it womb wisdom of creation? Or where does sexuality come in? How do you relate to that?
Yeah. So, so for me, sexuality is simply our life force. That is the life force. And the portal of that life force is our womb space, which is our womb wisdom, or, or being aware of that. Right. And, having so many fifth lines, as you said, and in my attractor field, and, like all these, I know abuse of power very well. I've abused it. I've used it. So I know that aspect of it. And I feel that what happened when I decided to go into the underworld is what I saw where this abuse of power comes from, and also, how distorted that sense of power is to us. I'll give you an example. Like for me, I come, and this is why also I believe like lineage work comes into even this sexuality talk, because we're passed down all these patterns of shame, all these patterns around, what healthy sexuality means. And, for me, I come from a lineage where the men were very abusive, and, the women were very submissive, and, that's kind of like the story. So when it came to me, I was like, that's not going to be my story. My story is I'm going to be an avenger for women, And so for me, that manipulation and that awareness of my sexuality, I was very aware of it from a young age, in my teens. And so I knew that it held certain power inside of it. And I used it. And I was very familiar with it. And when I went into the womb work and into really getting to know that archetype of this seductress, this archetype of this, manipulation, and that it's not just ours, but this is passed down. These are goes back to the stories of the priestess temples, and that siphoning of their sexual power as well, and all of these different aspects. Then you begin to see the story, the myth that you are actually involved in and that you're playing into, and you start to see, wow, yes, I could continue to use this, but this is a false matrix of power. Even though it feels very real, it's not real. And so what does that real central sexual power look like or feel like? And so for me, that's the most pristine, in a return to our innocence as humans, as divine humans, where we have as women this inner template that knows how to create life, that is always, every month we die and we rebirth, through our menstruation, through our cycles. And so for me now, being able to tap into that power versus that false matrix that, it's very tempting because it is so powerful, and it's very easy to abuse your power, especially when you're in positions of leadership. Obviously we're seeing it kind of fall all over the place, right? And so, but for me, that comes when you're not really in touch with actually the divine mother aspect of it, where you sort of still identify yourself as that archetype of the lover, or you still have that sense of like being drunk on power, and I think that the underworld journey is what's really sobering. And then you can choose. So what am I going to give my alliance to? What am I going to serve? And so for me, it's a daily, in my morning practice, it's like I make a daily commitment of what I am here to serve, how I'm here to walk, and of course there's so many ways in which you can abuse your power. It's very easy, especially like once you really sort of clear those channels, you can start to see how easily it is to like move that piece and it'll just trickle down to this, and so that's where you have to really check into your divine alignment, and for me it's like aligning to what is divine will, not my will but thy will. And because that always moves me into center. It's not about what Anabel, the human desire, indulgent Anabel, wants all the time, although she can have a space as well, but it's always where am I serving from, where am I moving from? And I feel like, that's ultimate power, when you actually know that you can do things but you don't need to do them, when you can have that self-restraint and understand that what you're serving is something greater than that immediate or that, in the moment, whatever satisfaction you're going to get. And I feel like that's what's really that commitment and that devotion,
Mm-hmm. Would you say that hero's journey through the underworld, that's different for men and women? Because I think some people will be like, oh, womb wisdom, that was women can have. But how would you speak about it in terms of being different genders?
I feel it's for everyone. And really, because when I say womb wisdom, what I'm referring to is the cosmic womb, which is the birther of all, birther of planets, birther of universe, just the divine intelligence that is that life impulse that we all have. So, even in the womb apprenticeship that I was in, there was men in it inside as well. And, for them, their center is Hara, but again, it's that center of creation. I do believe myself that being in a woman's body, we have a different texture of communication with the divine, of embodying the divine, which I feel is the, sort of that, like the union perspective, right? That's how we're complementary to each other, where there is qualities that men have more amplified within them. There are qualities that as women, we also have more amplified within us. And it's about like learning, like, how do we support and come into union, come into allyship inside of this feminine leadership that we're both embodying now. Because, feminine is not just woman, feminine is an essence. And as we carry both of those polarities inside of us. And I feel like that journey is about getting to know that feminine aspect, getting to know that masculine aspect, and coming into sacred marriage inside of that yourself. And then that's something that you can share in with another being without putting on them the responsibility to complete you, you know, or to, and so it becomes a dance rather than this, you know, compromising thing. It's simply, we are here for each other, through each other even, but always anchored in my own individuation first.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Do you feel as a woman in today's world and the way that we are kind of supposed to be in leadership roles, do you feel like there's any conflict in being a woman in a leadership role, or have you found a way that is not compromising you in any way?
Well, you know, and when you say that, it's like I can think of so many ways right off like that. We are still, you know, with so many challenges of being in a woman's body in leadership, because what I also see is that there's a lot of women mimicking men in leadership positions, you know, and I often find that that's actually the most challenging part, you know, because there's a commitment there and an identification that is very difficult to dissolve or to let go of in order to embrace your original blueprint, right? And you know, and I want to take a moment to like I'm really grateful for all the women that have come before us that have opened up these spaces for us, you know, because they faced a lot of challenges that thanks to that, now we're in a different position, in a more privileged position. And I always, you know, I tune into that a lot, Bella, because I feel like the challenges that I have now, I take them on with a lot of gratitude and with a lot of, you know, courage, because I know that I'm also doing that for the future generations, you know, the women, the girls that are right now, you know, coming into their bleeding years and trying to figure out like what's being a woman, you know, and we're often shown all these images of what woman is. So it's really a very beautiful journey into embracing our womanhood, first of all. And then I feel from then, because of that trust and that beauty, then we can start to look to express that leadership, right? A leadership that is rooted in a seasonal aspect, in a harmonious way. And, you know, like one of the things that I always, you know, find fascinating is like, for a long time, I was always like, what's the balance? Like, I want to be in balance, you know, until I finally had to let go of that word, because I feel like as a woman, I'm never going to find balance, because I feel like for me, it's harmony. You know, it's like sometimes all of me requires that, and sometimes all of me requires that. And if I'm always trying to seek a balance, I'm always going to be compromising myself in things that I should really dive into. And so, you know, I feel like that until we can learn to trust ourselves and to really be rooted in that, it's going to be very difficult for us to stand up in a leadership position and in these values, because there's so much like not wanting that in the world. There's so much that's wanting to, you know, squash you down and tell you how, you know, you're so emotional and you're so this and all these different things. But knowing like, actually, our emotions is a superpower that we have. You know, all these things that we have been divided from or like made to forget is actually because that's what gives us access to seeing the whole picture, you know, like the holistic picture, and being able to bring the aspects that we need, you know, like our own inner medicine woman. It's like, what does this situation need? And I really feel like that's why we have this ability to multitask, right? Because we know, you know, we can take care of, you know, for me, I have a son. So it's like, I can take care of my son. I can, you know, run my business. I can be here. I can be there. And at the end of the day, I also have to remember that I have to nourish my well, that I have to tend to my well so that I can be available for that. And I think that a lot of times as women, we abandon that. You know, we get really passionate about something and it's like, we go all the way there until we deplete. And I think that that's one of the most challenging things, is like, how do we remember to tend to ourselves before we reach a level of depletion that then makes us, you know? So there's so many challenges, yes, to it.
I want to bring up your chart again. I mean, there's something that makes me concentrate or like see that 1.4 in the middle. Maybe it is because it's my evolution, but I feel the way Richard speaks about SQ is a lot about like that one point, the heart, when we kind of like fall through and are absorbed. And I'm wondering because the first gene key is about the void, is about entropy, is about accepting the darkness and the light, I feel like. So I'm wondering how you relate to your SQ and also to that kind of underworld or the void, or accepting that we can't ejaculate all the time. There are times of rest, and like you have a kind of double heart because it's a fourth line in that position of the heart. And I would just love you to kind of speak about your experience with your SQ.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear about your experience with it in the evolution, because I feel like, for me, this one has taken a lot of patience and contemplation and, cultivation, because again, that state of, for me, how it shows up is times where I go into a deep melancholy, like a deep state of, and in the past, what that would do for me is I would identify with that, and then I would want to move out of it, or I would, like seek out like what something's wrong with me, and it wasn't until I started surrendering to that and even writing from that place, and just really being gentle, because I feel like that first gene key requires so much gentleness, inside of it. And then in the SQ aspect, I really feel like this is sort of like my small child, like it's that small child that, it just wants to play, and it wants to, see the beauty. And that's when I was a child, like for me, I was really curious, and I would look into the mountains and wonder how many people live there, and, just like all these different things. And so that's what like it reminds me of that. And also when it would move me into this deep sadness, and for me, that's how I would feel, like a sadness and missing people, missing loved ones. And I still go through this, even now, where there will be periods where I miss people that were in my past, and it's okay, like saying it's okay to miss those connections. It's okay to miss that. It doesn't mean that they have to be in my life now. It doesn't mean that I want them back in my life. But there's that aspect of it. And when I surrender to that and I allow it, I feel that freshness, that beauty just emerge back again with a whole like a refined life force, of color and sound. And it's almost like all of my senses are a little bit more amplified. So yeah, and it's, I feel like for me, it really shows up around relationships, around, loved ones, and I'm, community and things like that. And also this has been a big one for me of not getting caught up in that community thing just because of that need to belong, that need to belong to something or anything, but realizing that actually when I open my heart, when I'm in that heart space, this community naturally comes around me, like it forms itself, it magnetizes itself. And I've really been able to see this in my own family unit, that as I spoke in my earlier years, I was really controlling. I was like, you're going to do this and you know how to do this. And, and I was great at it. It worked for a little bit. But the contrast of that has been to allow them to really just be them, to learn how to love them, how to embrace them, even when something made me really sad about it, and to go into that sadness and into that space. And then naturally they would sense my open heart. They would sense like that goodwill. And then it just sort of, now it's become this just beautiful family unit that we have, that we're very understanding and loving of each other, accepting of each other. But I would say that fourth is just sort of been the relationships, and even, something that I share that something that I've never really been able to understand. And this was even before my healing journey, was that it was like, why, how can you love and then become strangers. Like for me, that's like never made sense. Like I just don't get it. Like how people can share something so beautiful, intimate, and all this, and then all of a sudden, there's all these rules. So there has to be this, kind of, we're strangers now. But so accepting that is something, and I can't change it, but I can surrender to it and allow that, that melancholy to refine that beauty and that freshness, and allow me to see the world in a different way.
Yeah, I resonate a lot with that. And I have a lot of fourth lines. So I also have one in this queue.
You're just the overflowing heart. So much love to give.
But there is so much sadness in it too, especially when you have. Do you hear me twice? I hear myself.
And
let me put this in. I think this is better. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I feel for me it was a lot to not run away from the entropy, to not run away from the depression. And even if sometimes the depression wasn't mine, like you say, being acceptant of somebody else being in that place, and even kind of like the city is about seeing the beauty even in that. And I do kind of smile when you're saying about like knowing what's best for the other, because having that and being really convincing and knowing that you're speaking in the heart, like what can be wrong? But there is still something there where you're saying that the non-guiding is something that really can make somebody else open that door to, whether it's underworld or that journey that they need to go on, that the soul had decided it wanted to go on. And that's what the Jinkies is talking to as well. Like every soul chose to come down for something, to allow them that journey. And don't run away from darkness. And so I do resonate a lot. And also that community in the childhood, and like the belonging, and then how much are we union and how much are we individuals.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of that community, and that line 4 that I find is that, the line 4 can easily get sucked into others, into communities, external communities, and others groups, and lose itself, because it does, want so badly to just love and belong. And it's like, why aren't we always loving each other? And why aren't we always, just sort of in that space? But I feel like the medicine for that line 4 is to really appreciate their individuation process. Because once you're really anchored in that individuation process, again, you're not moved externally. You're sort of allowing then the external to move around you, so that, because then that these are the people that are supposed to be around me. These are the communities in which I can be in, and I think, as you mentioned, like that 7th, going back to that 7th, it is, having this one in it, I feel like it's just so perfect, because I think that that's the space that allows that guidance to emerge, where when we are disconnected from that darkness and from that sadness and from seeing the beauty of the ugly, from being able to really feel it, then you're still in a divided state somehow, and the true guidance that is coming from those depths isn't allowed to come up, to sort of emerge through you, and that's how I see like that. And I talk a lot about like that journey of descent, because it's like mind, heart, womb space, and then it's like we do the work there, but then it rises on its own when it is ready. It is not anything that we have to do. All that we have to do is make space for it. It's create the bandwidth of resilience to allow that to emerge, that guidance to emerge. And it emerges from that creation place, and it's filtered through the heart for others, and then it moves into the structures in our mental body that can make it become alive and give it the vehicle that it needs to move in the external world. And for me, that's the creative process. It's like I go in and I drop and I clear, I am with what I don't want to be with. And that dissolves. And when that dissolves, it allows that freshness, it allows that guidance to emerge and, and it filters out through and I want to say that through the heart space, because if we're not filtering it through the heart space, then it can be just what I want. But when I filter it through the heart space, it goes into that fourth of the communities. What is the highest good of all? And then I can create those vehicles and structures outside in the world for them to move in. Yeah.
I don't know how much you're into human design. Are you a little bit, or is that part of like what you're using with the gene keys?
Yeah, a little bit. I actually came to human design first. And for me, I was in a time where I was in the underworld and I was like, this is too fixed. It's like, don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me how I'm going to be. So, which is why the Gene Keys was so amazing for me, because it was more of like a poetic journey, and stuff. So I know a little bit, but not very familiar with it. I know you're a genius in this realm. And even Dan is, he gives me more guidance in it, but I'm not too literate in it.
I mean, I just feel like it's beautiful to see somebody's energy and how it moves. And we have been speaking about the 7 and the 1, and you have the G center, which is the center about the love, communion. Is it still doing echo? Is it okay?
Not on my side.
Not on your side. Let's see. I saw somebody posting in the comments before. Is it better? Put it in the chat if it's better. So the G center is about love, direction, identity. And you have that center open and wide. So you have to take in a lot from other people and discern, is this mine or is it not? Or you could also kind of become that perfect white prince or the prince on a white horse, because you have to hear everything around you and then decide what's yours. And I feel to have your 7 completely open or very open center, and then have the first child, like you're saying, very tender. I can understand a journey of discernment, how to use that 7, how to use that 1, how to understand what's not yours. And I wonder, going back to what you said in the beginning, you feel like part of that identification in your life had to be listening more outwardly than inwardly. Like, what is the direction? What is love? Who am I?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like that, right? And even like that discernment, I feel like discernment is such a huge piece of that 7th, right? Of like knowing what, and and I feel like there's so much of this, like what for me, where I am with that discernment and what is mine and what is theirs and all that. And obviously working with people, you're constantly in these deep processes, and it's more about like I've come to this place where I feel like everything is mine, because I am here. And what that does for me is that it allows me to make a priority the deep listening that I was speaking into, because I feel that that's where the true discernment comes from, and how I'm going to respond to what is coming at me, or even what I'm wanting to put out, so it is that. And I could really, see that before, where it was like that my identification comes from like the environment that I'm in, like it's very easy, that's something that's very easy for me to kind of like shapeshift in the environment that I'm in. And all of a sudden I'm like, is this me, or is this just what? But, it does come down again to that, for me, anchoring into that divine will, going into that deep center inside of myself, so that I know where I'm moving, where I'm being moved from, before I actually move. And so that it's really cool to hear you put it that way, that it's in those open centers, because it is I do feel that at times, for me, listening is huge, going deep in, because then I feel like I kind of lose the center, or like the direction, or and it's always like coming back into that womb space, and that rootedness, and like, what am I serving with this, what am I choosing with this, and then not getting caught in the noise, because there's so many expectations that are placed on us, and and on me. There's a lot of like this image projection and all of these different things. So for me, it's always like coming back into the full spectrum of who I am, and expressing that full spectrum, not being caught up in like, does this match my image, or is this what people expect of me? It's like, I'm like, no, I'm pretty done with that. I did that like a lot of years. And so now really tapping into what is authentic inside of me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to point out is that you were speaking about sexuality as life force before. And really, when I see your sacral center with all these activations, and this channel that has to do with intimacy, and with diplomacy and peace, and also the 360, there is something powerful with your sacral energy and how you use it in the world, whether it's for good or for bad, I guess.
Yes. And I am, I've had to do a lot of self-forgiveness and asking for forgiveness inside of that. But yeah, it's a lot of power in that.
And then I also look at your north nodes, and this is something we don't have in the gene keys. So this is 29.6, and that's for me, the main gene key that has to do with tantra. And then you have divine will on the other side. In the second line, is about the sexual part of us. So I'm wondering, what is devotion? Divine will for you? What does? I mean, it's a big question, but someone can probably answer that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, that's we were speaking earlier about the commitment, and I think that is it's always being committed to what I'm in now. And because I think that in the past, one of the things that would move me into that dishonesty, move me into, that abuse of power, was because my commitment wasn't in the present. It wasn't to what I was in now. There was always this like, well, I could see all this other stuff, and so I feel like working with that commitment in that 29th and that resolve, to really commit to whatever is in front of me is what I'm committed to, until life or divine will says otherwise. So it's almost like, being so anchored inside of yourself and showing up in that way, that you allow that divine intelligence to work its way with it. So for me, a lot of times, I would have like, well, do I want to end this or not? Do I need to do this or not? And I have the fifth in my attractor field, that impatience, so I was always moving in relationships. I could see it very obviously. It was like, okay, well, you're not moving fast enough for me, so I've got to go, and you're not changing, and you say you were going to change 3 months ago, and I've got to go. I don't have time for this, and all these different things. And it was learning that because I was in that impatience, there was never true commitment to that present. I was not committed and devoted enough to that container that I was in for any power to be harnessed for any true transformation. So it's, in a sense, it's like what kept me running from myself and just projecting it onto the other person. It's like, you're not moving fast enough, And so what I realized and what I learned from that was that any time that I move out of that commitment, I am leaking energy. I am leaking life force that is necessary in order for me to see the truth of the moment, And so I become almost like I'm really like screwing myself in a way. Like I'm just making it harder on myself by not being in that commitment. And devotion for me, and I know this might sound, sort of extreme, but I know that you understand what I mean. It's like devotion for me is like being willing to give up my life for something that I truly believe in, and that aspect of it, like, and what I can say is like my son, I see my son, I'm devoted as a mother. I'm devoted to my son. My son, like if I had to, choose, of course, I would do anything for him. And for me, that's true devotion. That's true sacred union. That's when you're one with God. You are the beloved because you have disappeared of your own selfishness, of your own self-centeredness into that ocean of just pure love.
Right.
And that's where, like I really feel that power. And again, like I said, I just feel like that 29th is such, and it's in the ring of union. And when the first time I read that key, I was just like, oh my God, I love this. Why is this not on my chart? Like I just, and then, I realized it's in the ring, it's in the ring of union, and that 7th, right? And so they go together because it's like you said, leadership has been abused and misused. And I believe it's because it is outside of that devotion, outside of that commitment, where it's more of that half-heartedness and of that more that self-gain, right? Where when you are leading from that place of devotion, from that place of divine will, there is no self-gain in essence. That's just sort of like what we get to, like, I'm really grateful I'm in a human body and I get to eat chocolate and I get to go like fancy places and I get to, enjoy these things, but they're not who I am. They don't define who I am, and they don't move me, in the same way that what I stand for does. And for me, that's devotion. That's really the essence. It's an essence.
Yeah. And what about divine will? Because you have it both in your north node of your soul, you could say, and you have it in your pearl. So what does that mean?
That divine will, right? Like that. My experience of this key has been about a lot of the exhaustion. Knowing that whenever I start feeling exhausted, is because I am compromising my alignment with divine will. And really divine will is allowing God to work through you. And so I feel that when we are moving out of our own will, we come outside of that alignment. And that, I really experienced that resolve come alive in my life, first when it had to as a survival mechanism, to make it. And, with my brothers and my family situation. And then I felt it come alive again the moment that I, really stepped into that commitment and that devotion. The moment that I said, I choose God, I choose to embody this, come what may. It doesn't matter what comes in and out of my life. It doesn't matter if I'm meant to live out a life of suffering or a life of thriving or a life of whatever. If this is what is meant for me, then that is where my commitment is. Mm-hmm. And so that I feel like that resolve I tap into whenever I start feeling exhausted. I check in with myself and I'm like, okay, it's time to go to the garden, go to the ocean. I love going to the ocean. I get a lot of clarity there. And that resolve emerges on its own, so I kind of make myself go rest and do slow things. And then the energy kind of comes back alive. And I feel that it comes back alive when I let go, when I surrender. It's almost like that's more energy is available. And I also find that this is like that one that you're seeking in different places, it's almost like when we stay in the shallows and we don't truly commit to something, we can't dive in deeper, so we have to kind of keep going and moving, and it becomes exhausting. Yeah. And that's a sign of life that there is no energy for that, because that's not where life force is. So it kind of makes you exhausted so that you can come back in and see like, okay, where do I need to realign? Where do I, that sort of space. And a lot of times it's not even asking those questions, as you know, Bella, it's just sort of surrendering into the space, because then we can quickly move into that mind, right? Of like, where am I doing this wrong? How could I do this better? And it's, I don't want it to be confused with that aspect of it. But yeah, that divine will for me is everything. It's sort of like every morning anchoring into that conversation, into that embodiment, and knowing that I am an emanation of God, and everything that I say, all my behaviors, all of those things are a representation of that essence, and so and all is holy, it's where it's coming from. So I'm a very, I can be a sexually expressed person. I can be the most devotional Mother Mary. Like for me, it's all coming from the same place. They're just different ways in which we get to express an essence, but again, the full spectrum, that we're not supposed to abandon any parts of ourselves. And especially when we've done that work to reinstate them into their innocence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow, I love that. Thank you.
Thank you. I love that too. Reminder. Thank you. I'm like, okay, yes, I need to, keep doing this, because it does. I feel like that is where that fire comes from, that fire of, and going back to that seventh key. And I know we don't have much time now, but I feel for me right now, what's really present is the solar aspect of feminine leadership, and as women, how we are at the forefront of this movement and of this consciousness that is becoming an embodied consciousness, no longer a concept. And that's where I really feel like, because of the journey that I have taken, and it's taking me into those fires and into that refinement. It's like now that flame it cannot be extinguished. That flame can only be nourished and nurtured by me, tended by me, but it's what fuels that divine will and that sacred activism and that desire to be in the world and to be and partake in things that break my heart. And so I have the bandwidth to be with the heartbreak and also to see the beauty inside of it so that I can, facilitate that transformation as well. And I really believe this to every cell in my being, that this is what we are ushering in now this is the feminine leadership of, the one that's like, every child is our child. Mm-hmm. All suffering is our suffering. There is no more of this divisive, like, oh, that's your kid, you take care of that. That's your problem, you take care of that. But, when we can wake up to that, it's like we can all discover that each of us is moved by a different thread. You may have a different thread of what breaks your heart. I may have a different thread. But when we both commit and bring that sacred life force into that, this is how we're weaving that tapestry of restoration and of true leadership that is an embodied and a wholesome way of lileading and of being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, when I hear you speak, I feel like the 3-5, sometimes because I'm a 4-6, I can sometimes feel like, oh, they don't commit, and why don't they step into the leadership, and what would it look to be like a healthy 3-5? And I see it in Rosie, because I love Rosie Aronson and know her over years, and with you too, it's like, wow, this is how it feels like when the 3-5 is taking responsibility.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I love Rosie is such a beautiful embodiment of that and a representation of that. So yes, beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. And it's also like that. Oh, sorry, what else? I was going to bring up, because I wanted to touch on this, is I feel like a really powerful thing of the 7th is that to remember that it is the power behind the throne. And I think that a lot of the 7th shadow wants to be in the throne, wants to sit in that throne, so, and it's this paradox that when you actually embrace the power behind the throne, you realize that you are that throne. Right. You are there. You don't have to try or be that. you become an embodiment of that. And that's how I see like a powerful woman. When I think of a powerful woman, to me is that woman that can bring about that change and inspiration and that transformation without her being at the forefront or caring to be at the forefront of anything, but rather through that presence. It is moving. It is almost like, like the spider in the spider web. It's like just tapping a little, a part of the web, and it's reverberating out. It doesn't need to be out there. And so that power behind the throne for me is so powerful. And that I work a lot with the archetype of the Magdalene. And for me, that's why I love that archetype, because I feel like it is the embodiment of that seventh gene key, that power behind the throne. It's like everybody, thought it's Christ, and Christ consciousness and all of these things. But, to know that that Magdalene was such a pillar for that mission, for that, unfolding. And so for me, it's really special to my journey and my process, because that archetype really represents for me what that seventh is.
I never thought about them together, but it makes a lot of sense when you are connecting it. So I'm wondering if you would tell us, what are you up to? What are the next steps? Where can people find you? Like, I would love to hear.
In my garden. People can find me in my garden. Well, I have my website, anabelvizcarra.com, social media as well. And I feel like I'm in one of those spaces right now where I had all these plans, and there's all this beautiful opportunity, out there, and I'm being called to kind of come back in, check in, and then see how we're going to proceed, and so for me right now, it's a time of just deep listening and seeing where that energy wants to take me. I do have an apprenticeship that I will be starting October 31st. And this is for the solar feminine Christ embodiment. And so that's a big project that's been brewing for a long time, and I'm really excited about. And then I work with people inside of mentorship containers, either 3 or 6 months, because again, I feel like the containers that are long term are so potent. When we do, like, single sessions are great, and I love doing that and talking about gene keys and possibilities and all that. But for me, it's really creating a container where those possibilities become probabilities, and that takes time to nurture and to drop into. So those are the things. There's plans, lots of plans, kind of circling around, but right now I'm moving more into that space of listening. And as you know, right now everything's day to day is changing and shifting, and so much energy right now, that's dissolving and rebirthing. So really wanting to ride those waves of it.
Yeah, well, thank you. The hour just ran away like we knew it would.
Like we knew it would. Yes, absolutely. But
yeah, thank you everybody who's watching, and I'm sorry for the echo that was going on. That's sometimes like that. The interference, too much energy, maybe.
The tech gremlins. Yes. Thank you so much to everyone tuning in. Thank you, Bella, for this meeting.